Yes, I left my house at 6:20 this morning.
Yeah.
Haven't quite been home yet.
No, I believe it.
You'd like
A few
it.
long ones, it's good though, it's good though. Okay, we are, I should, yes, stop chatting. So, thank you all for being here. I am very grateful to see, yes, familiar faces every week and that you keep coming back. I am very grateful for that. This is our very last of the 4-part series on getting to know your government. So, and I really can't tell you how grateful I am, because this little spitball idea of, hey, it might be fun. Then it's actually, not only having you guys here, but we've now had 2, maybe 3 other libraries in the state reach out and say, we would like to do that. So I said, here's the outline, here's the PowerPoints, change them for your, and knock yourselves out, have fun. So hopefully we'll start seeing more and more of these around the state. That would be a very good thing. So thank you for being the guinea pigs that we got to test this on and get some feedback. So hopefully at some point tonight, just let me know what you think and maybe what can we adjust and do differently and do better. That would be great. I am very, very grateful. With me tonight is Representative Art Washut, and not only is he one of my favorite humans, but I am very fortunate to sit on the floor next to him. And I am very grateful because there's so many occasions that whether it's a process or a bill or I lean over and like, I don't understand, or what are we doing? What am I supposed to be voting on? So truly a stellar resource. So now you get to tell them, how long have you been, how long have you served, and committees you were on and head?
Yeah, so delighted to be here. Very much appreciate the invitation to join you. What Elissa didn't mention to you is that I'm about 3/4 deaf in this ear, and she sits on my left. So sometimes I'm not as helpful as she might want me to be. She's looking at me like waiting for an answer, and I'm going, what did you just say?
I thought you were going to say it made it more tolerable. I'm just over there. You have no idea.
But Elissa found a way to get through her first general session. This general session is 8 weeks, and it just goes on and on. And I was sick as a dog for 5 weeks out of the 8. And but Elissa has emotional support coal. She's got a big chunk of coal sitting on top of her desk. And when things get tough, she pets it. And then she feels all better and gets through the day. So I was first elected in 2018. So I'm in my 4th term in the House. We have 2-year terms. I've served primarily on Judiciary Committee. When I first came into the legislature, if you were on Judiciary, you could only be on Judiciary. You could only have one committee assignment because the workload was so intense for the Judiciary Committee. Since then, we've changed things, and the Judiciary Committee doesn't get all of those bills that we once did, and we only meet 3 days a week during the session. So a lot of judiciary members will serve on more than one committee. I also am a co-chair of the Wyoming State Shooting Complex Task Force, creating a new state shooting complex, something like a state park, will be located up outside of Cody, between Cody and Matisse, and I co-chair that task force. I've served on the Rules Committee, which is quite an experience because there are challenges occur to the rules periodically during the session, and we'll all huddle up around the speaker's desk and try to hammer out what we think the rules say, and then the members vote whether they want to follow our guidance or not. So well, I'm not sure we solved anything, but anyway, that's the way it works. So that's my committees and how long. So I think I got that covered.
And you chair.
And I chair the Judiciary Committee in the House.
And has background in law enforcement.
Right.
And teaching.
Teaching. I've been teaching. I was in the Casper Police Department from 1980 to 2000. Retired as the interim police chief in 2000. Went immediately, like the next day, to work as a full-time faculty member at Casper College, teaching criminal justice and political science and one addictionology class. And I've been now at the college 25 years, which was longer than I was in law enforcement. That doesn't seem possible. And then started my third career with the legislature in 2018. So thank you for inviting me.
Really anything, if it's law enforcement, if it's statutory, if it's judiciary in our courts, if it's anything, that's when I lean over to Art. Especially when they're bills, and that's one of the beautiful things I think about having a citizen legislature, because we all have careers and experience that we bring. So I know anything within the courts, or any bill that comes forward that's related to the courts, or how we process things, or, you know, regarding law enforcement, I can ask Art, you know, what is the impact? What does this look like? How does this affect our officers on the street? Because he knows, which is very helpful. So we have folks that are, you know, construction background and healthcare, and I mean, just, it's really nice having those experts on the floor.
Yes.
Yeah, and I get to sit between education and law enforcement, so I've got it covered. So very grateful that he is here. So at any point, I mean, as we're going through things, I asked Representative Washit to jump in anytime, because I will likely get things wrong or not quite right. And then, yeah, additional information that I am new to and don't have, he'll be a good source for that. So typically, as we have done, this format that we're gonna do tonight is a little bit different, and I'll tell you why. We'll spend a lot of, chunk of the time just on how the state functions in terms of the different branches and what that all entails and what that looks like, and statutorily why that is, and how much of the Constitution shakes that out for us. Then really shift into how those laws and regulations are created. That's where I think a lot of the questions are, because people will call and say, you know, I'm interested in this bill. How do I find, I don't even know where it is. How do I find out where it is? When does the public get to weigh in, and just tracking this system? So working through that to give you an idea of how that works, and then spend some time on our website, the WyoLeg website, because there is so much good information there. It's just figuring out where to go to find it. So we'll walk through that a little bit, and then opportunities to get, you will notice what is missing is budget and revenue, right? Because we talked about that with the city, and we talked about with counties. I will tell you, there's not enough time. That needs to be an evening in and of itself. My predecessor, so whose seat I filled, Jerry Obermuller, is an accountant, CPA. I mean, so much knowledge in terms of finance. And he actually created a spreadsheet to track all of the accounts and where the money goes and what pays out, and then printed that out for me. And it's this big. It's a spreadsheet. I mean, they're spreadsheets. It's this big, and it's like 9 pages. So I could not do it justice tonight. So I thought maybe if we just have a different one that's all about the budget and revenue and where money comes in and where it goes out and how it's allocated, but I didn't want to spend 10 minutes on it and then leave us even more confused than maybe we were when we started. So I'm not doing it tonight. Nope. And since I create the slides, I can decide we're not doing it. Just really not enough time, not enough time. So in terms of our 3 branches, this is Article 2 of our Constitution. Article 1 really is the one that lays out, we have 3 branches, very separate branches of government, but Article 2 is the one that really says these are the responsibilities that you have. So with our legislative branch, that's Article 3 actually specifically devoted to our legislative branch. So the lawmaking body, right, we're the ones that make the laws, levy taxes. So when the question comes up in terms of taxes, does the county have any authority to levy? Oh, really? Does the city? No? The state? Yeah, we do. And we'll even statutorily tell cities and counties. But remember, yeah, the county is just the extension of the state. So we will say in statutes what's gonna happen, and then our counties have to figure that out. So we are the ones that levy taxes and approve the budget. And then yes, in terms of the district, how that's going to be appropriated, we determine that. Which agency, which departments, we determine how those funds are, where they're gonna go. And then oversee a lot of the state agencies and public education. So that all falls on us. And we are the only branch with the power to impeach, which is fascinating, and even that process, whether it's the executive branch, the legislative branch, or the judicial. Am I right on that? Okay, have to make sure, yes. So then Article 4 is the executive branch, which is the governor. Well, there's 5 offices actually. So like any executive branch, right, they are there to enforce the laws that we create. So we create the laws, they have to enforce and administer those. So most of the agencies, most of the departments, that's where those rules and regulations come in. It's like, this is how we follow this law. This is what it looks like. So in the Constitution, there are 5 mandated executive branch that are elected by the people. So that's the governor, secretary of state, the state auditor, state treasurer, and superintendent of public instruction. Those 5. And as we mentioned with our counties last time, with our county commissioners here, our county commissioners often get, they get more votes than anybody in terms of their district, except for those 5, because those 5 are statewide. Everybody else tends to be a Senate district or a House district or they are countywide, so they have a lot. But those 5 are the entire state. And each of them serve 4 years. So what's interesting then with our judicial branch, because it really is separated. You have one body that's gonna make the law. You have one body that will then enforce, make sure that's actually carried out. The judicial branch then is the one that decides all of the legal matters, and that usually comes when somebody is challenging the rule of law. And is this constitutional, is it not constitutional? And our courts get to decide that. And oftentimes with language in statute, if it's unclear, if it's vague, if it creates problems, we hear about it through a lawsuit. And then we get to change things, because our judicial branch decides. Wyoming is set up a little bit differently and uniquely, so we'll talk a little bit about that and how that works. So with our legislative branch, we're bicameral like most with our Senate and our House. What I didn't know, because when you go to the Capitol and you walk into the House, it just looks different, it feels different. And then you walk into the Senate and it just looks different and it feels different. And that really is just how it was set up. So the House of Representatives is the common people's house. It's the common folk. And the Senate tends to be a more elevated, they just feel stuffy over there. They just feel formal and, I don't know, we get up, we walk around, we talk to each other. But it is a very different feel. It has a more elevated feel, where the House of Representatives really is just the house of common people. It's just the people. So check it out, it feels very different. It's kind of cool. There's this dark and, I don't know, feels like a museum over there. It's not nearly as much fun.
Doesn't mean windows.
It doesn't have very many windows,
No, just the one window on the ceiling.
Yeah, it's very dark, it's very stuffy, it's very, I don't know, it's not my favorite. I would much rather see over on the House side, where all the common people are. Article 3 though really maps out all of those. What's interesting, the difference between our senators and our House of Representatives. So senators serve 4 years and the House serves 2 years. And so when they originally set it up, they set it up to alternate, so you're not clearing out everybody at the same time, right? So some of our very first 4-year senators actually served 2 years, because they were there 2 years and then they cycled out, so we could create that cycle. What's interesting, to even run for the Senate, you have to be 25 years old. Perhaps a little elevated in education. On the common folk side, you just have to be 21. So that is a difference. For both, though, you have to, by statute, you have to live within the district that you are running for and elected from. You have to live there for 12 months. So what I didn't know, what's interesting, I actually asked a question to our LSO because I thought maybe I would have to move this last summer. So I reached out to our director at LSO and said, this creates a problem, right? Because I'm halfway through my term. So if I move out of my district, do I have to resign? And he said, no, you don't. Because what I didn't know was that any statutes that we create, those statutes cannot preempt or trump what is written in the Constitution. And the Constitution only says you have to live in that district 12 months prior to. It doesn't say anything about if you move, if you relocate. So he said, our recommendation is, you will complete your term, complete serving your term, but if you run again, you can't, because you no longer have lived in that district for 12 months, and the new one, you haven't lived there for 12 months. So it puts you in a bind that way, but the Constitution only says you have to be a resident at least 12 months, which I didn't know. Learn new things, okay? So make sure, wherever you have lived, live there for 12 months, be at least 21 if you want to run for the House, 25 if you want to be a senator, and then jump in with both feet. What is also interesting to me, this is how people think we just do things. No, so much of it is dictated by the Constitution. So Article 3, Section 6 talks about the duration and compensation. And it says, this is one of the things I learned serving the very first term, words matter. And when you're reading draft legislation, when you're looking through the Constitution, there's a huge difference between shall and may, right? We shall not meet for more than 60 days. Don't do it. And our general session, which are referenced, is on the odd years. So 2025 was a general session. Even numbered, 26, it's a budget session. Why? Because the Constitution says so. Right? And the other thing that is mentioned in there that we've talked about, this February being a budget session, typically legislation that is not relevant to the budget, because the whole focus of our time there is supposed to be on the budget and appropriating those funds. And so any legislation that comes through that is not related has to get 2/3 vote. 2/3 of the members have to approve that piece of legislation being introduced. That's not the stipulation in the general session, right? But it is in the budget session. Constitution says, nope, gotta have 2/3. Section 7 really is time and place, and it says, oh yes, sir.
Well, if there's 2/3 of vote, aren't they already voting on it?
No, just
That's just to get it in.
Oh, okay. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so there will be bills out here, and if they want it to be introduced into the House for discussion, it takes 2/3.
And it's not uncommon for somebody to vote to introduce a bill and then vote against the bill eventually on final vote. But they wanted the bill to be discussed, they wanted to hear about it, they wanted to see what shape it would be in at the end, but they ultimately didn't vote for it. So sometimes people will vote to introduce a bill who won't ultimately support it, and vice versa. People will vote not to introduce a bill, not because they don't support the bill, but because they think we've got bigger fish to fry at that time.
Which is interesting. So and that's one of the things in the interim committees that we end up talking about. We might have legislation that we think, but if we think about, taking a 2/3 to get it introduced, might it be better to wait until the next general session? How difficult is it to get it to work through right now? So that helps us determine whether we want to actually push something through right now or if it could wait. But there are some things that waiting until the next general is not good. It needs to be done now. So then, yeah, it's big enough. We need to try and work through that 2/3. 7 really is about time and place, and it dictates the day and the place and the time at noon on this day. This is when you gavel in, this is when you gavel out. Section 8, the rules, punishment, and protection is really interesting because it gives each chamber the authority to establish rules. This is how the House operates. This is how the Senate operates. They establish those rules. And at the beginning of each session, we decide. So when we went into the general session, that was one of the first things we did, is we talked about the rules established by the previous legislative group, 67th. And so we looked at those rules and decided which ones we liked and which ones we wanted to amend and change, and then we had to vote on those because it really is procedurally how we're gonna handle things. And some of that is in terms of punishment. We have the authority to punish our members and take action against them for grievance. So the House has that authority, the Senate has that authority. And the protections really are specific to what happens on the floor and in terms of speech and I can't remember what the rule is called when we're debating. There are things that
Decorum.
but there are things that we say and in conversation that is protected speech.
Yes, we
Yeah.
have immunity
Yeah.
for things that we say on the floor.
On the
during
floor.
debate.
Mm-hmm. Which is good, because there are topics, there are bills that, I mean, you get into some pretty gnarly conversations, and you need to be able to have those conversations without worrying about, you know, what's gonna happen and if there's gonna be issues. So it is protected on the floor, and because that's our workspace, and we work through a lot of it. So Section 8 is the one that outlines all of that.
What's the punishment? I mean, if that happens, what kind of punishment is there?
Mr. Law Enforcement.
All the way up to expulsion from the body.
Really?
You know, the body would have a vote, and you can be censured, which is a formal reprimand. You can demand, the body can demand a formal apology from the member, all the way up to throwing your rear end right out of and forcing a replacement to be elected.
So we can determine that in the House, and the Senate can determine that. We can't call out a senator.
That's right.
Yeah,
We should, but we don't.
we should. Yes, sir.
To execute those penalties, do you need a majority, like a 2/3 vote, or same?
Yes, for expulsion, it is the 2/3. So you've got to convince a lot of people that what
It's pretty
this
egregious.
member did was so grievous that they need to be removed.
Yeah.
Has that happened in your time in Congress?
I've seen forced apologies. I've not seen anybody removed.
I think this last session, one of our House members, wrote an article that was not positive to some of the other House members. And one of our representatives, spoke up about it, but there wasn't really formal action taken. It was just that, not cool, not cool, you know? So that does happen, when things outside the chamber happen that affect us on the inside. We can call each other out on that. What is also interesting, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to anyway. Section 16 on privilege. So at the very beginning of the session, we are each issued, these sticker decals that go on our windshields. I didn't know what it was, it sat there for a long time. I had no idea what it was for until our clerk told me, you need to put that on your windshield. Okay, whatever. And she said, no, Section 16. So what's interesting as a citizen, when you are serving in the legislature during that time, there are things that we are privileged to be sheltered, protected from. So in all of those cases, except for treason, felony, violation of oath, breach of the peace, we are privileged from arrest. So you can't arrest me during session. I have work to do. Wait until after, unless it's those big ones, The other one is during our attendance or going to session. So I said, so if I don't plan well and I leave Casper and I'm late to session and possibly exceeding the speed limit, can I get in trouble for that? And she said, technically no, you can't. You can after. And it's not leaving session, but getting to session. because they recognized at the time it is important for our citizens to be there and to get there, and we don't want to impede that progress unless it is a really grievous misstep back when this was written. So the other thing to consider, I think, and I don't know when this was last updated, actually when I first started, when I got elected and was serving and told my mom I was going to be in Cheyenne January, February, March, her first thought was, that's horrible. That is like the worst time of the year to be on the road. Why would they want you on the road at that time? And I said, because back in the day when it first started, most of them are ranchers and, you know, farmers. And those were the 3 months out of the year they didn't have work to do. So, and that's the way it is and has always been. So we tend to meet in the lousiest time of the year because that's, you know, the best time to meet. But we really do get some, like if roads are closed, if we can have, you know, special, I mean, the Highway Patrol and YDOT will work with us to get us there because they know it's important. This is important work and we need to help you get there. So they do, which is cool. I have not yet spent going to or from. I haven't challenged that theory yet, but.
I think it's real important to note that what Representative Campbell said about you can be apprehended after, right? So if I'm caught littering driving down the interstate on my way to the legislature, I can't be thrown in jail right then. But a warrant might be issued for my arrest, and on the day that the session adjourns, I might get hooked up. So I'm still could be held accountable for that behavior. I just can't be prevented. And so you think back in the day when legislators may have been riding a horse, right? And they're crossing a county, and the legislator belongs to this party, and the sheriff of that county belongs to the other party, and there's a really contentious vote pending on Monday morning. Might that sheriff be tempted to, so these kinds of things make sense in a way, and I always get students at the college go, what? But you're really not immune. You
No.
can be prosecuted, but just not during the session, except for one of the biggies.
Which is fascinating. So hearing about, I think, yeah, the explanation was in terms of, and they would just detain them because it could prevent votes from going through, and that's when I said, so technically, because that's who I am, right? One of our chief of police, because I asked those questions, I said, I have yet to find anywhere written that it is illegal to turn left on a red light. And she said, what do you mean? And I said, well, if it's like a one-way, it's like turning right, but you're not because it's a one-way left. So I should be able to turn left. So then he went through and no, because this says, and this says, and this says. But does it say anywhere? You cannot turn left on a red light. Those are the questions I asked. I just want to make sure I'm clear. So section 20, and here are the things that I think are really important to know. So section 20 of Article 3, in terms of laws being passed and the amendments, right? The second line, so no bill shall be altered or amended on its passage through either house to change its original purpose. So there happened this time that there were bills that were either, you know, I supported or didn't support, but then an amendment would be attached to it that truly did change maybe the intent or the purpose. And then we all ended up voting against those because the Constitution says anything you do to alter or amend cannot change its original intent, its original purpose. Really grateful they laid that out there. The other big one that we focus on a lot, I don't know where I put it in here. Oh, section 24. Yeah, section 24. So a bill can contain only one subject. One thing. And that has to be expressed in the title. So anytime we start adding amendments that change not only maybe the original scope, but also it now has multiple subjects and multiple, it's unconstitutional. Yeah. And Art will have a lot more. But these are the things I didn't know. People just said, you can't. Well, why can't I? Because the Constitution says. Yeah.
So one of the results here are bills with very long titles. Because the bill is one subject, but it does 8 different things within that general topic. But this really prevents, or like Congress will pass an omnibus bill, an omnibus crime bill that deals with everything from street lights to prison sentences to the number of FBI agents, right? They got all 100 different things, it'll be 2,000-page bill. We don't get that. A long bill in our legislature is about 40 pages, and those get a lot of from the body when they see these 40-page bills come along. So we don't do omnibus bills, but to say that we only have one topic or that an amendment never changes the meaning of the bill, you know, in the years I've been there, I've seen substitute bills where you start off, you got this bill, and instead of putting in 80 amendments, you throw away the whole bill and start over with the substitute bill. And almost always, you could make the argument that you've changed the original intent or purpose, and to what degree have you changed the intent or purpose? That's where the Rules Committee used to get challenged all the time to weigh in on those kinds of things. But the checkpoint on that is the other body at the end of the hall. Because we might agree this is okay, this is not amending it outside of its original intent, or this is not multiple topics, but the body down the other end of the hall might take a different view of it. So it's really challenging sometimes. Like you might remember this year, the stuffy Senate that was referred to earlier killed the supplemental budget bill with 6 days left in the session. And so there were some important things getting funded in that supplemental budget bill. So now everybody's scrambling, hoping to find some place to put some of that spending into a different bill without making it a different topic, or without making it an additional topic. And there's some wiggle room there. It's pretty tight, but sometimes you can massage a bill and put a separate topic into it and not violate that principle of the Constitution.
It was tough. I mean, there was one, I know, to Art's point, there was some funding, I think in terms of, you know, disabled youth and kiddos, and I knew there was a bill coming up that was the topic of the bill. And so I had to go down to the Senate, to the senator who was the sponsor of that bill, and said, can I tuck this in there? So you want to make sure this funding goes through, but you know, got her approval before we tried it. But it creates, especially when you're on the floor and you've got things firing to remember, you know, does this change? Does this amend? Is this one thing? Is it constitutionally what problems we're gonna have? The other fun one I didn't know about was section 21, the enacting clause. So it actually says in the Constitution that in the bill, I mean, the words are, be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. And so the first time I saw an amendment come up, and you have your draft bill, and the amendment is to delete that line. I don't know what that means. But the process, the point of that amendment is if you just propose deleting that line, it then goes away. Because by Constitution, by law, it has to be there. So it kind of pauses everything for a minute so we can have a discussion. But the first time I was like, well, I don't know what that means. Why would you do that? Why would you amend that? And Art, I mean, probably has a lot more, better explanation, but the whole point of the amendment is we need to pause for a minute and really talk about this. And if it's going in the right direction, if it's whatever, it's just stop for just a minute.
So by rule, you can only, on an amendment, you can only debate the amendment. You can't debate the rest of the bill. So a delete the enacting clause amendment allows us to debate the entire bill. So, and it's always on third reading. And so when that delete the enacting clause amendment comes up, the member introduces the amendment and then says, and I will withdraw the amendment at the appropriate time. And then we debate the whole bill. Everything in the bill is open for discussion at that point. Basically asking people, are you sure you want to pass this law? And then after the debate's done, the member that brought the amendment says, Mr. Speaker, I respectfully withdraw my amendment. And then you don't vote on the amendment, because if the amendment were to pass, the bill would not be legal. And
It
would
goes
not.
away.
So, it's just a procedural process that we give our members one more chance to debate the whole bill.
I had no idea. So for 8 weeks, I mean, on occasion, I would hear delete the enacting clause. I have no idea what that means. I don't know what you're talking about. That's what it is. Section 21, yep, Constitution, says it right there. The other thing is just procedurally, and we'll talk through procedurally what that looks like, but why we do what we do. It's laid out in the Constitution, so every bill that comes in has to go to committee. Has to. It has to be appointed and referred to a committee for deliberation and public input. The amount of votes, section 25, the amount of votes required to pass a bill. How we amend them, the section 27, special and local laws. So we cannot pass legislation that is specific to a local entity, a business, a problem singular to a municipality, a county. So anything that is very specialized or local, targeting a group, a thing, a whatever, legislatively we can't pass those laws, you know, because they apply to everyone. They have to apply to everyone. Yes.
Want an example?
Yes, I do. I love that you're here.
So, a few years ago, we had a private religious school that was trying to build a new campus in Jackson, Wyoming. And the board, the planning, the zoning board, or some board within Jackson municipal government was putting stipulations in place that were quite onerous. And this school was having a difficult time meeting all those requirements. And those same requirements were not made for a public school. So you could build a public school across the street and not have to meet any of those same requirements that this Christian school was going to have to meet on the other side of the street. And so we couldn't pass a bill that says those codes in Jackson are null and void, they don't count. But what we could do is we could say, statewide, any private school that's being constructed has to be constructed to the same standards as a public school. And that's what we did. There was only one school that this was going to apply to at that moment, but the law is still on the book. So if we were to build a new private Christian school in Thermopolis, the same law would apply to it. So it wasn't a special law just for Jackson.
So then we have to be mindful of those bills, right? Which tends to be, this is just my personal perspective, when there are challenges, right, that come from a county or from a municipality, and then reach out and, do your research, and this really isn't a problem for anybody else. Or this action would benefit these counties, but it would damage and do harm to these counties. Then my response is it shouldn't be a state law, right? Because a state law affects everyone. And if it only is happening in one county, maybe not necessarily a good place to start is with us. But it's thinking about those things and how it affects everyone in the state. Origin of bills, that's where they need to start. So anything related to taxes, levying taxes, revenue, has to start on the House side. They have to originate with us. So we're the ones that get to levy. The Senate can't do that, we do. General appropriation bills, so in terms of how money is appropriated. What's interesting is, the Constitution says that we will not appropriate money for anything that is out of the ordinary expenses of legislative, executive, judicial departments, interest on public debt, and from public schools. One of the things I absolutely love about Wyoming, and we are one of the few states that in the Constitution, we have the right to public education. Says so in the Constitution. Every resident in Wyoming has a right, fundamental right, to public education. the thing it says also is that the state government will provide and ensure that it is equal, uniform, can't remember all the words, but that is our responsibility. So, which is where property taxes and stuff come in. Because then the state says we're responsible for providing a uniform public education system. There are some counties, you know, that have more revenue than others. But our job is to make sure it is equally distributed. So typically what happens with, yes sir,
Sorry, are you saying K through 12 or are you talking about secondary as well?
K through 12.
K through 12, okay, gotcha.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, okay. So what's interesting then, and I may get some of this wrong, with property taxes, a big chunk of the revenue does go to the state, because then the state will disperse. So there is equity, because there are some counties that the needs, the educational needs, right, of their kiddos, they have more kiddos in public education than they do revenue. So there's a gap. Here's the need of our district, our, you know, public education system in our district, and here's the revenue we bring in. We don't bring in enough. There are other counties that here's the need and we bring in a lot more. So the overage goes to the state and then is distributed, so they are all equal. We all have equal footing and can provide for our kiddos, which is part of the thing that the Constitution mandates that we do that. So we don't have one county that gets a lot of money and one county that doesn't. And so their public schools are struggling. We're responsible for making sure that it's all equal and uniform. So we generate the revenue, collect the revenue, appropriate the revenue, but then we don't dictate to the school districts, you know, necessarily how that works. They get to decide for some of that, because it's gonna be different. Some schools are gonna need money for here, and some are gonna need it for other things. So they get, I think, a little more control in terms of the funding. That's where our school board comes in.
So our funding is a block grant.
Right.
And the school district then can apply that grant as they wish. The amount of the grant is set by a formula, but the formula bears little relationship to the reality of how that school district functions. So depending upon how many bodies you have, how many schools, how many vice principals, how many principals, you get a certain amount of money for each of those things. But if you don't wanna fund all those vice principals, you can use that excess money to hire school resource officers or fund something else in your district. So we just give them a block grant. But every 5 years, we're supposed to reevaluate that and
Yeah.
look at the basket of goods, and that's what's going on this summer. And
Is it ever?
and the term is recapture. So we recapture
Yep.
those counties that have more money than they need. Some of that money will be recaptured and given to counties that don't have sufficient
Yeah,
amounts of
like we
money.
get money from Gillette.
Right. It didn't used to be that way.
I know.
It didn't used to be, it used to be every county was self-funded by their own school bonds and so forth. And we did have very unequal schools. The schools with a lot of mineral wealth had Olympic swimming pools and professional stages and their theaters, and then the other schools had dirt football fields and, 1950s wooden desks. So that's what the Supreme Court ultimately ruled, that we needed to make that uniform and complete.
Can you address the situation of public tax money going to private schools, religious schools, home schools? Because that money, even though they say, well, this is not public school money, it takes away public school money. And so why are they allowed to do that?
Before Art answers, and that's why I included section 36, because that's often what is referenced, because the Constitution says that the state will not appropriate, we will not give money to charitable, industrial, educational, benevolent purposes to any person, corporation, or community that is not under absolute control of the state. So that's where some of the hang up gets, is what does that mean and what does that look like? So if we're taking public education funds outside of an entity that is not under absolute control of the state, it's not part of the public education system, can we do that? can we appropriate outside of that system? And so this, I think, it's section 36, where the hangup is and where the discussion is, and what we can or cannot do with that money.
So this is all going to be litigated, right? The courts are gonna ultimately decide whether that was the permissible use of those funds or not. But the legislative question is, if you have a pot of money and the excess money in that pot, basically when that pot boils over, the overflow goes to education, okay? But some of the overflow goes someplace else. So not all of it goes to education. So while that money is still in that pot, it hasn't yet boiled over, is the legislature free to divert that money to something other than K-12 education? So it's not really in the education stream at that point, when it's extracted from the pot and goes someplace else. But the effect is, there's less money in that pot, so it takes longer for it to boil over, for the
If they send it to
overflow
other
to tip.
schools, if they send it to our schools, it is in the education stream.
But it's not. Well, it's still in the pot. Well, it's still in the pot.
Yeah.
Technically, it's in this account, it's not the education account. And so
But as soon as they dump it into the education.
until it reaches a certain
Yeah.
level and tips in. And so this is the kind of
That's
complexity.
the spreadsheet.
And that's, you know, the spreadsheet and the complexity and
Mhm.
why you have disagreements. And so you have constitutional principles that are not always uniformly agreed upon
Right.
and interpreted the same way by every member.
Right, which is why we have three very different branches, right? Because the Constitution is there, the legislative branch, we will make laws, right? We make laws. And then it's the public that says, wait a minute, I don't think you can do this. And so then it goes in front of the courts, and the courts decide, is this constitutional, is it not constitutional, why is it not? It's not for us to decide. Yeah, the courts get to decide that, and that's where it is, but I think it's, yeah, section 36 is where the hangup is, and I think that's where some of it's gonna be, is determining what that means, and, yeah, interpreting that law, and the application of that law, our courts will do.
36, as I read it, sounds pretty black and white, like,
It all goes back to, yeah, where the money is, where it's coming out, how it's being appropriated, and the process that goes through. So that's why the courts now are involved in that process and deciding whether it's okay to do or not, yeah.
but 36 mandates
Mhm.
how it is to be used, and that entity has to be under absolute
Complete control,
control of the
yeah.
state.
Which then,
So I don't know where the wiggle room is.
that's,
Because when you look back at history, you'll find times when, for example, St. Stephen's School on the reservation was a Bureau of Indian Affairs school. The state was funding it. Wasn't under the absolute control of the state. So there's examples like that, a precedent where it seems like, well, as long as enough people agreed that that was a good use, then it wasn't seen as an unconstitutional use. So these are the
Sets a
kinds of
precedent.
complexities, and every member takes an oath to uphold the Constitution, as does the governor, as do the justices of the court. But we each make our own independent judgment about whether or not that constitutional principle applies to this particular question. And that's where you'll get differences of opinion, even among the lawyers in the legislature. You'll sometimes get 4 lawyers say it's constitutional and 3 say it's unconstitutional. And let alone all of us non-lawyers who have to wrestle with these kinds of questions.
so really grateful that, yes, our judicial system takes care of most of those things, and they'll come back and tell us.
How is the funds for the schools to the communities? Is it how many children are in the schools? So
It's based
if
on
someone
kiddos.
decided to send their child to a private school, which is their right,
Mhm.
then that money for that child would not, I don't want, the parents don't need it, whatever, but that takes it away from the school because they're not going to
Right.
the public school, right? Did I phrase that right?
Yeah, it's based on the number of kiddos. I think we have 93,000 kiddos in our
Students,
public
yeah.
students in our public education system,
I think that's right.
K-12, right now. So then it
Okay.
would be 93,000 minus 1.
Yeah, cause I,
Yeah, so, and the calculation, I can't even tell you. I sat through most of the, I listened to most of the recalibration and the model and all of the things that they take into consideration, just in terms of the needs of, from materials to staff to resources. It's a lot, yeah, how they figure out number of kiddos. I'm glad it's not my job. Glad it's not my job, but that's where you'll find that information. With our executive branch, little different there. Really does lay out, the stipulations in terms of the governor and what the governor has the power to do as our commander-in-chief. He can, approve, veto legislation. He can convene us, he can call us back into session, under, pretty extraordinary occasions, but he has the power to do that. Make appointments, pardons, reprieves, communicates with us, so he's the one that delivers the state of, the condition of the state to the legislature, and all of the communications and just business within the executive branch, and is the one that, expedites actions of the legislature. So whenever we move to pass legislation, it's on him to make sure it's enacted and executed. So that falls to the governor. They are there for 4 years, term of 4 years. What's interesting, and I think this is where I could be wrong, but what the Constitution says is the executive power shall be vested in a governor who shall hold his office for the term of 4 years and until his successor is elected and duly qualified. I don't think our Constitution specifies the number of terms that a governor can run, and I don't think it's been challenged in the court yet. So,
1977 or something like that, the people of Wyoming voted a referendum to put term limits on the legislature, on the statewide elected officials. And it was immediately challenged by legislators and was found unconstitutional, because the Constitution says what are the requirements. You have to be 21 to be a House member, 25, and it doesn't say anything about not previously been twice elected or anything like that. So there's no term limit in the Constitution. So the court ruled that it was unconstitutional as applied to legislators. Then it was challenged by Secretary of State, and for the 4 lower statewide elected officials, and the Supreme Court ruled, yes, it's unconstitutional for you too, because again, your qualifications for office have to be in the Constitution. And then what left the governor? And no governor has challenged that statutory provision of term limits. And so there's nothing in the Constitution. Everybody knows that if it's challenged, it'll go down the same way the term limits for the legislature and the other statewide elected went down for the exact same reason. But governors, since this passed, have all respected it. The last 3-term governor was Governor Hirschler. Haven't had a 3-term governor since. Nobody's challenged it.
which is interesting. So that's Article 4, Section 1 tells you, here are the qualifications, and you will be there until a successor is elected and duly qualified. What's interesting then, I know this is kind of difficult to read, but where you find all of our executive branch, so we have the 5 electeds by all of the people: governor, secretary of state, auditor, treasurer, superintendent. And then the Constitution says we, as a state, have to appoint a state engineer and inspector of mines. We have various boards and commissions: the Board of Land Commissioners, Board of Equalization, University of Wyoming Board of Trustees. Those are all appointed. The departments, the cabinets, by Constitution, that we have to have. So the state has to provide Department of Agriculture, Department of Audit, Department of Corrections, Department of Employment, State Engineer, Department of Health, Department of Revenue. Constitution dictates those are services we provide. Then the operating agencies tend to fall under the executive branch. Those are all of our state building, geological, oil and gas commissions, state board of parole, public defenders, all of those things. Our statutory board, so those are elected. Our state loan and investment board, SLIB board, those are our 5 electeds. So governor, secretary of state, auditor, treasurer, and, public education. Those 5 are what make up the SLIB board. Other state agencies, I mean, kind of dictates how those are. The ones appointed by the governor and approved by the Senate, those are all of the ones on that right-hand side. Board of Barber Examiners, the Wyoming Business Council, Children's Trust Fund, yeah, Wyoming Education, all of those are appointed by the governor and then approved by the Senate. Yes, sir.
Oh, so the governor, he doesn't appoint the, State Department directors?
The State Department, as far as,
You know, like, Department of Transportation, Department of Workforce Services, Department of State Department of Cultural Resources, he doesn't appoint those directors?
I don't think so, but I'm not gonna answer that question.
Yeah, the heads of the department are appointed by the governor with the, most of those are all, confirmed by the Senate. The Transportation Commission and the Game and Fish Commission are quasi-independent. The commissions actually govern those operations, but the, director of that agency is appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. So, they're quasi-independent.
So typically when we get a new director for like the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, that, the candidates, I think, come from the commission. Here's who we recommend, but then it's the governor that appoints and the Senate
So
confirms.
you've got a director of the Game and Fish Department, and then you've got the Game and Fish Commission, and I think it's president is the actual title of the head of the commission, right? So the commission really directs the department. The legislature and the governor don't play much of a role in the day-to-day operations of the Game and Fish or the Wyoming Department of Transportation.
The commissions do.
Most of their money is, maybe all their money, is not from the general fund of the legislature. Their money comes from gasoline tax for YDOT, so they get all this transportation money for fuel tax directly is appropriated to YDOT. Game and Fish licensing fees, all that money is directly appropriated to the Game and Fish Commission for the operation of the Game and Fish Department. So we don't do a budget for those entities the same way we do for the university or for
Department of Health,
Department of Health or Department of Corrections.
it's a little bit different.
Makes sense.
Well, I was wondering, who decides, how many people are in a department? I mean, how many people can the commissioners appoint? What are the boards, how many are on the board, and those kinds of things?
So what's interesting is, and I think, I could be wrong, there is a statute that governs, that says, dictates, and that's the same thing applies to our county commissioners, because it is a board of commissioners, and it says you have to have at least 3, and no more than 7.
So in terms of the employees within like the Game and Fish Department, the commission decides how many can we afford, okay? Every other department, like Department of Health, Department of the Attorney General, or all those, the legislature decides how many personnel they will have. But for those quasi-independent, it's the commission itself, the Transportation Commission and the Game and Fish Commission, that determine how many personnel they will have and what their assignments will be.
So for these departments, our Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, Family Services, Department of Health, Department of Revenue, Department of Transportation, Workforce, those we decide, based on appropriations and funding and budget, that kind of determines the number of employees.
So I don't, excuse me, I don't know if you can answer this, but, the State Loan and Investment Board for a while became the deciding board for charter schools.
Mhm.
Did you guys vote to put them into that position, or did they decide that themselves?
No, we
You did?
I wasn't there.
Okay, no, I knew it, but I.
But usually, that's a legislative action.
Okay,
And so what we did, I believe the way the bill worked was, we gave them the authority, and then they could decide the process for determining how many charter schools, and they had a cap on it. And I think last year, or this year, we
and
took
now
away
there's
the
no
cap.
cap anymore.
We did away the cap.
Yeah, and they have a different group.
Right.
Do you know why did you guys do that? What was the reason?
I think there was a desire within the legislature to see more charter schools, and charter schools were encountering a fair amount of resistance from local school boards, which were the other authorizing avenue. Your school board can authorize or SLIB or the charter school. And so in order to get more charter schools, there's a sense that we'll give that authority to another group rather than just your local schools.
Okay.
Outside of the school board. So, fun, judicial branch. What I also really love about our judicial branch is within Wyoming, all of our courts, it is the courts of the people and for the people. So they are open to every person for injury done to person, reputation, or property. We will have justice administered without sale, denial, or delay. So, pretty cool when you go through and read our Constitution, how intentional they were. In terms of our powers of the courts, and I included, the website, both, I mean, not only for our courts, but I can send you one for the our executive branch, because they have very different, we all have our own websites where information can be found. So our court system, they're the ones that interpret the laws, which is where it gets tricky, because we have to be very clear that our intent is communicated in the law, because then we don't necessarily have to rely on the court's understanding what our intention was and interpreting what our intention is. So the more clear we can be, the easier it makes it for them. But we have to be careful not to tell them how to interpret the law. You can't tell them how to do their job. We just need to do our job better. So they get to interpret the laws, apply them to cases, and then our higher Supreme Courts, they review decisions of the lower courts and make sure that we're all in, that we comply with the state constitution. Our Wyoming Supreme Court truly has, the appellate and jurisdiction of all of the other courts going up. District courts handle most of our big criminal, civil cases, probate, and appeals from the lower courts. So remember, we're divided into 9, I think we have 9, districts. We are District 7. So municipal courts, district courts, state courts. And our Constitution really does outline the powers and authority of our Supreme Court, our district courts, and all of those, how that check and balance system works within our courts. Yes, sir? Oh, okay. Yes,
How
ma'am.
many members are there of the Wyoming Supreme Court?
There you go.
Oh, thank you. I took a tour of the state.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it's gorgeous. And I get into the Supreme Court and there's all these chairs and I'm going, oh my gosh.
No.
Anyway,
So we have 4 plus the chief. Right, so we have 5. Yeah, 5. Yes, sir.
Municipal court, is that a constitutional court? Municipal
No.
court?
That's city.
That's it.
So our municipal courts, those are all municipal, so that's what happens when you violate a city ordinance. I violated a law established by the city, so I go to the city court. With our cities, like the city of Casper, if you remember, our city council employs 3. So they oversee and employ our city manager. They hire, fire, and oversee our city attorney, and they hire, fire, oversee our municipal judges.
One thing, it's kind of interesting is the municipal court fine revenue. When the municipal judge fines you $50 for illegal parking or something, that $50 goes back to the general fund of the municipality. When you get fined by circuit court, district court, those fines go to the school fund. So when a deputy sheriff or a highway patrolman writes you a speeding ticket, that revenue doesn't go back to the highway patrol or to the county. That money goes to the schools. But municipalities write tickets and their fine revenue goes back to their general fund. So it's just a difference in the way things are done, and sometimes people find that interesting.
It is. So we have 98 municipal systems, and 78 judges in those. Our Wyoming Supreme Courts, we have 4 justices and 1 chief. Our chief justice by statute, well, I think it's, yeah, at the age of 70, mandatory retirement. Constitution. So, yes, Chief Justice Fox just retired. Very sad about that. I think she retired and turned 70 the next day.
Right, and that's true for district courts as well, but not true for the circuit court. The circuit court was created statutorily by the legislature and has no mandatory retirement age. So you can have 80-year-old circuit court judges, but never on the district or Supreme Court.
Is it mandatory 70 retirement? So we have a new chief justice. Our district courts, we have 9 districts, right? Ours is District 7. There are 27 district court judges. Last week with our county discussion, Jill Keister, she is our district court clerk. So she is the one that orchestrates and organizes all the things as far as our District 7. Wyoming Circuit Courts, we have 24 judges and 4 magistrates. The Chancery Court is a new court division that was established by the legislature. And that is here in Casper, and we just, I can't remember when that judge was sworn in, not too long ago. January, yeah. So Chancery Court is new. So, and then on the federal side, yeah, in terms of our Supreme Court Chief Justices, our federal courts, and our Circuit of Appeals, Wyoming, we're in the 10th Circuit, and our federal district courts.
So Chancery Court is business court, and so when you're entering into a business agreement, you can put in your contract that if there's a dispute over this contract, it'll be heard in Chancery Court. And the advantage of that is that the district courts, where other lawsuits are heard, they also hear all the criminal cases, and criminal cases have a speedy trial provision as one of our rights. And so those criminal cases take first priority, which means that some of these civil lawsuits languish a while, waiting for a day in court in district court. But the Chancery Court only deals with those business cases. So it's much more expedient. All the cases are heard before a judge without a jury, so it's a faster resolution. So companies and entities that enter into these contracts can get a faster solution if there's a dispute over a contract. And that's why we created Chancery Court, makes Wyoming more business friendly.
And it also alleviates some of the pressure on our district courts.
Is there a defined process of how you can appeal to the federal court?
Yes, there is, and Representative Washup would love it.
So much of that is set by the laws of Congress, right? So if you violate a federal law, those cases would have jurisdiction in the federal court. Likewise, if you commit an act in a federal district, Yellowstone National Park, for example, the federal courts would have jurisdiction over that act. But it's all statutorily set by the federal government for at least what we call original jurisdiction of the case. There is a process where a case that's adjudicated in the state courts, where there's a U.S. constitutional question or a question of U.S. law, can get appealed into the federal system to resolve that. So let's say the Wyoming Supreme Court rules that an act of a police officer in a community violated the 4th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Well, if there's a question about that search and seizure 4th Amendment under the U.S. Constitution, that question potentially could be addressed by the U.S. Supreme Court on appeal. But if the same court ruled on that case based upon the search and seizure requirements of the Wyoming Constitution, then the Wyoming Supreme Court would be the last decider. It would not be appealed to the federal system, or could not be appealed to the federal system. So it depends on the type of law involved and with the jurisdiction of the court.
Yeah, and if the challenge is, they're challenging, this law doesn't fit within the Wyoming Constitution, it'll stay here. But if it goes bigger than that to the U.S. Constitution.
A related question. Does the governor have the privilege of executive orders? Just like how the president has?
With executive orders.
Yeah.
Can our governor do that?
So typically, when you think of executive orders of the governor, those are directives given to members of the state government that he oversees. So if the governor says, I want the Wyoming Department of Agriculture to do X, that could be construed as an executive order.
Because they're within the executive branch.
Within the executive, so he's directing the activities of that agency, as the chief executive. It's a little different than, what we're seeing now with executive orders of the president, which are, being treated as quasi-statutory acts, and they're really not. And they are limited. That's why you see some of these being challenged in court, is that just because the governor or the president or a governor orders something, it still has to be constitutional, has to be statutorily authorized, or have to be otherwise legally within the power of that office.
So that's one of the things that comes up legislatively within the different branches. Can we dictate something to the judicial branch or something to the executive branch? Can the executive branch, issue an order that dictates how we do things? And the Constitution is pretty clear on that separation of. So within the executive branch, we don't really get to tell some of those departments what to do and how to do business. And it's the other way around too. So our Constitution is pretty clear about that.
Art, you said earlier, going back to the land, territorial jurisdiction. Does the federal what other lands does the federal government have, territorial jurisdiction as far as?
We have a lot of
A lot, but
BLM, BOR.
So federal law can be applied not just on federal lands, but places where there's a federal nexus or a federal connection. So, dealing illegal drugs can be both a state crime and a federal crime at the same moment. So you only sell a pound of heroin once, but that might be prosecuted in state court, or it could be prosecuted in federal court. Could be prosecuted in both. That almost never happens because everybody's got limited resources. But in terms of federal lands, of course, the District of Columbia is a federal district. The national parks, certain, and I'm by no means an expert on this, but certain waters off the coast for a certain distance are within the federal jurisdiction. Certain acts on Indian reservations fall within the jurisdiction of the federal government. It gets pretty complicated, especially the Indian reservation thing. It's, gets really complicated. I hope that gives you an idea, but I'm probably not the one to answer all of that.
To be more specific, post office.
So a post office is a federal piece of property. And so the federal government can limit certain things, like carrying of a concealed firearm into a post office, right? And so even though it might be legal under the state of Wyoming for you to carry a concealed weapon, to carry that concealed weapon into a federal facility, a federal courthouse, a federal post office, might violate a federal standard. And so a Casper police officer probably wouldn't be arresting you, but perhaps an FBI agent or a postal inspector or somebody might be able to apprehend somebody who violated one of those federal codes that only applies to post offices. Stealing of mail, for example, is a federal crime, even if it happens out of my mailbox inside the city of Casper. The fact that you stole something that was delivered by the U.S. Postal Service, it now falls under federal laws.
What about, to add to that question, what about the First Amendment? What about the freedom of speech in the post office? What happens when a city police person comes into the post office and obstructs your
we could really go down a
I
rabbit
was
hole.
gonna say, this is gonna be a
So-
whole.
So the
whole
First
thing,
Amendment,
yeah.
the First Amendment
You
freedom
can
of
answer that
speech.
question, it'll be it for me, I promise.
So-
No, these are really good questions.
The
I
First
just wish we
Amendment
had
freedom of
lots more
speech
time.
applies everywhere, right, everywhere in the country. The question is, to what extent can it be limited and so forth, and by whom and where and so forth, and, there are 249 years of case law dealing with speech issues in this country, and there are limitations, it's not an absolute right, so, places, universities and so forth commonly will have a free speech zone. So if you wanna come in and protest, you protest at that area, so you're not interfering with classes. If you got a bullhorn and you're standing outside my classroom shouting what you want all the students to hear, well, that really disrupts their ability to get an education. So universities say, yeah, you're gonna have public free speech and so forth, but it's gonna be at this location. And I'm assuming post offices are probably the same. There are other laws that apply for political speech and so forth inside governmental entities, campaigning. You know, you can't be trying to recruit people to vote for your favorite candidate while you're a postal worker inside a post office. I would suppose that that's probably prohibited. So, yeah, I'm not a First Amendment lawyer. I'm not gonna try to answer all of that, but freedom of speech generally applies everywhere. But there are limitations.
That's one of the things that I was reminded of often. There are no absolutes, right? There are limitations on freedoms, on rights, especially when it involves other people. So there are, we tend to think of them as absolutes, but they not necessarily are. I'm gonna pause questions for just a minute, because these are really good, but this is the one thing I wanna point out that is unique to Wyoming, and I don't remember when this started. So we established, the legislature established the Judicial Nomination Commission. And what's incredible about this commission is it's 3 attorneys that the Bar Association selects. That's outside, right? So the Bar Association says these are 3 attorneys that we think would be good. 3 attorneys, I mean, they're not attorneys that the governor appoints. And then the Chief Justice is also a non-voting member of that commission. So anytime a judgeship opens within the, circuit district, state courts, that position opens up. It's our Judicial Nomination Commission that goes through this really extensive application process. One of our deputy city attorneys was just appointed a district judge, and that was the 3rd time she had applied. So it is a really extensive application interview process. And so whenever a judge puts in an application, they reach out to, every attorney that's been in front of them, every opposing attorney, to say what is your sense of this person and their ability and to follow the rule of the law and to be impartial. So they get, a full 360 of these people and just their values and their work ethic. So all of the applications go to the nomination commission. They work through all of those, do all of the vetting, all of the interviews, and then they choose 3 that they think would be the best qualified and best suited and give those 3 names to the governor. Then the governor appoints one of the judges. So what is interesting is there's been conversation about, removing the commission and just making our judges elected officials, like everybody else. That's how it was before. And all of our judges were elected, and we saw some challenges with that. And so our state legislature said, whoa, this may not be a good idea. How do we do this better? So we have a truly separate and impartial judicial branch. So that's where we have the Judicial Nomination Commission. I'm not sure how many other states function or operate that way, but it is one of the, I think, things that works really well for our state.
So it seemed the JNC, the Judicial Nominating Commission process, is in our Constitution. It did replace electing of judges, and it's seen as a balance between the 2 systems. So if you look at the federal system where judges are appointed for life by the president and confirmed by the Senate, that maximizes judicial independence, which is an important concept, because remember, the judges at the time of King George III were under the thumb of the king, and they dared not make a ruling that was adverse to the interests of the king if they wanted to get a paycheck next month for being a judge. So they weren't really independent. So our federal system emphasizes judicial independence. Election of judges maximizes public accountability. And so an appointed judge in the federal system, next to no public accountability. They've got that job forever, whether we like them or not, okay? The Judicial Nominating Commission process is designed to give us a blend of political independence for the judges, because they get a term of office. So once they're confirmed by the voters, they serve 4 years for circuit court, 6 years for district court, 8 years for the Supreme Court. That's a long time where you're guaranteed your job and you can't be fired. You can be impeached, but you can't be fired. So that gives us a blend, because when the governor appoints these people, they serve until the next general election. And at the next general election, the voters get to decide, dump them or keep them. So that's where the accountability comes in.
It is, yeah.
Once they vote them in the first time, they vote them, then they get that whole term of office. At the end of that term of office, if they wish to serve another term and they meet the age requirements, they can be put on the ballot and we get to decide keep them or dump them. But there's no campaigning. Their name just shows up on the ballot and says, shall we retain Judge Smith for the 7th Judicial District Court, right? And the problem with that, of course, is you don't have much information. There's no campaign, you don't know anything about this person. We don't sit in the courthouse all day watching their rulings. So there are some ways to get information, and that's one of the things we're talking about now, is trying to, how can we get better information out for voters in advance of a voter protection? I talked too long on that.
Nope.
All right.
That was good, because that really is both things. So how do we prevent the political strategizing in terms of getting, our judges serving in office? So how do we separate them from that and then have that accountability? So we do both, which is pretty cool. And it tells you, that the years. So, yes, and our municipal courts are a little bit different. Our municipal courts do not go through the JNC, because that's municipality. So our city council is the one that hires, fires, oversees performance of our municipal judges and our municipal courts. So, little bit different process.
So there's no term limits
On our municipal,
on a nomination of the Supreme Court justices or the district court judges?
so our Supreme Court justice, once they go through, you have 3 people that maybe are nominated, the governor appoints one, then they serve an 8-year term. At the end of that 8-year term, we get to vote on whether they stay or not.
You actually serve them.
Up to
A
the-
one
the next term.
8-year term.
But they could, first they have to pass their initial, the way it works. Once the governor appoints them, they serve until the next general election. And then you get an initial vote of retention, and the voters get to say, keep them or dump them. Once they've been retained after that first vote of the
Then it's 8 years.
people, then they get an 8-year term on the Supreme Court, a 6-year term on the district court, or a 4-year term on the circuit court.
Or 6-year for chancery. Thank you.
So, is it the circuit judges that have a 70, they're not
That's our
confined to
district
70
and
years?
Supreme.
But the others are?
Yes.
Okay, but they have to be elected every 4 years then, okay.
So our Supreme Court and our district court, there's a 70-year age limit. Yeah. With our circuit court, our chancery courts, and our municipal courts, there's not. A mandatory retirement.
Yeah.
You wanna be a judge? You could be a judge.
We
So-
did just have that on the ballot, like 2024, I think, to extend that mandatory retirement age to 75, and the voters voted it down. So I think the voters are happy with the 70-year maximum age for our district and Supreme Court justices.
Cause that would take, constitution, changes in the constitution. These are all of the departments, so when people say, you know, what does the state do? This is what we do. All the departments and all of the services that we provide.
How do you break up with the federal? I mean, we've got national parks here and, BLM, a lot of BLM, and it just, if there's a crime on those lands, who takes care of that? The federal courts?
Depends on the crime.
Depends on the crime, yeah.
So if it's a state law violation that takes place on BLM lands, it's a state crime, be
It's a state law.
prosecuted in the state court. If it was a federal crime, such as, stealing of Indian artifacts, Native American artifacts off of BLM land, that's a federal crime.
Dinosaurs' bones.
Dinosaur bones, some of those archaeological things, there's laws protecting those things. So if you violate one of those federal laws on BLM land, you end up in federal court.
Yeah, so it depends on, which law you break. If it's city, if it's county, if it's state, if it's, which is why it is, I mean, so important that we have that consistency, right? Because when the feds, like with the possession and use of tobacco, when the feds went to 21, well then as a state, there's 21 and 18. So you have an 18-year-old, did they violate the state law, did they violate federal, I mean, it just puts our law enforcement in a tough spot, and our courts. So we have that alignment. When the feds change to 21, the state changes to 21. When the state changes to 21, then our cities and municipalities change to 21. So we have that sameness
Yeah.
in some of those, and we don't have different laws dictating different things in.
And you also see a lot of crossover, right? Like the Department of Environmental Quality is the state agency. And then you have the Environmental Protection Agency, which is a federal agency. And there's a lot of crossover about who's responsible for what. And so what we've been fortunate to be able to do on many things is to get the federal government to give DEQ primary responsibility. And so when you have an issue, it's Wyoming people dealing with Wyoming people rather than dealing with a federal bureaucracy. And that usually works out to our benefit. And so there are a variety of those kinds of things where the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Wyoming Game and Fish, a lot of crossover. And so we work out agreements about who's going to have primacy, under what circumstances will this be dealt with as a federal issue, when will it be dealt with as a state issue.
And we actually, I mean, within the state of Wyoming, so much of our land is federal land, but work really well with. So our game and fish works really well with, BLM and with BOR, and I mean, they have really good working relationships, which is nice. Those are all of the things that we do. There's a whole long list of things.
And Alyssa's an expert in all of them.
No, none of that. What's also interesting, though, is all the other things. So in terms of boards and commissions, really great way. I mean, for people, there are so many state boards and commissions, and if you have an interest, I mean, you apply and then can, serve on a lot of those. We have a few, these are just a few of the associations that represent different government entities, but then work with the legislature in terms of education and understanding. So ways to get involved. So our Wyoming Association of Municipalities, WAM, represents all 99 of our incorporated cities and towns. So, which as a legislature, I lean on them a lot and say, so if this goes through, doesn't go through, what does this look like for our municipalities? Otherwise, I have to make 99 phone calls. Our Wyoming County Commissioners Association, very much the same way, all 23. So really have a good understanding of what's going on in those 23 counties and what's important, what's not important, what are challenges we're running into, so we can have just one point of contact. Our Wyoming Association of Municipal Clerks and Treasurers, very much the same thing. WAMCAT, they usually have their conferences here in town. And then our Wyoming City Management Association, most of our city managers apply to that. So really good resources and ways to get involved that also help us, educate us, So, and we have somebody here, oh, look, it's already after 7:30, I have to be fast, okay. Here's the thing, I think that most people, and happy to get into more detail with this, maybe not right this minute, but how the process works in terms of legislation. So with the introduction and drafting, that comes from, I mean, citizens, people that are running into challenges and issues. They come to their legislator and say, here's a problem, this needs fixed, or we're running into this. So it originates with us, and we then hand it over to our legislative service office. And what is absolutely exceptional about LSO, they're all attorneys. They're all legally just brilliant. They know statutes, they understand all of the things. So we go to them with an idea and say, here's the problem, and we need to fix that. How do we do that? And then they do the research in terms of existing statute and what's going to contradict or create problems for, and they do all of the work. So it's formally drafted from our legislative service office. And then once they have a draft of what that legislation looks like, then we have to, the individual legislators, we're the ones that review it and make sure it actually does what we want it to do. And then that piece of legislation, whether it's coming out of committee or an individual, has to originate in that house. So if I sponsor a bill, it has to be introduced in the house, right? Because I am the point of origination. So what happens then, each piece of legislation goes through 3 readings. What I didn't know, I was like, oh, that's how that works. So it goes through three readings. The first reading is when the bill is introduced into the House, and then our speaker, or the president, depending on which side, which chamber it's in, then reads the title into, here's the bill, it's being introduced into the House, and then he or she, whoever the speaker, the president is, then, because the Constitution says it has to go to committee, so it is then assigned to a committee. So the first reading is introducing the body to the bill. Here's the bill, here's what it's about, and here's the committee that's going to review that. That's the first reading. So people will say, as the public, you have 3 readings. We get to weigh in on all 3 readings. No, because the first one is when it's read in and then assigned to a committee. It has to be assigned to a committee. So it comes into our house and then immediately gets kicked out to a committee. So based on the topic and which committee will be the most appropriate. So we have 12 standing committees. So if it is a issue that deals with Wyoming Game and Fish Department, with licensing, with our state parks, with recreation, with wildlife, it will be assigned to the Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife Committee, because that's where it makes sense, right? Usually, sometimes it doesn't. It gets kicked out to ag or something else. So there is a committee, right? That if it's anything election, it goes to a committee. If it's anything dealing with corporate, it goes to that committee. If it's judicial, law enforcement, it'll head over to judiciary. So once it has been assigned, so that the leader of the chamber, whether it's the speaker or the president, assigns it to that committee. Once it kicks out to the committee, then we are the ones that review the legislation and then have public comment. So that's when the public can come and testify, and we hear from different agencies, state agencies, different industry, different associations, different people. That's when they get to weigh in on that legislation, is during that public comment time. So committees will take public comment. What do you think about this? Is it good? Is it bad? Do we need to change it? How does this affect? You know, if there's a legislative, if there's a bill that is going to reduce our non-residents hunting, then the question we have to ask Game and Fish in terms of revenue, what does this do to you? How does this impact your budget, right? So we need to hear from the agencies that will be affected. So that's when we gather all of that information, and then as a committee, we decide if this piece of legislation needs to be amended, changed in any way, before we decide if this needs to, then if it is legislation that is good, I guess, for lack of a better word, to then go back to the House. Like, this is good legislation, we've got a lot of positive public, feedback. This is an important thing that needs to move forward. So then we will pass it out of committee back to the House where it originated. That's where the voting of the committee comes in. So if a bill dies in committee, it's because the people saying, no, we're not moving this forward, outweighed the people that were in favor of it. So it dies in committee. It doesn't go anywhere. That is where its resting place will be, is within that committee. There are some, I mean, that we didn't have time to process. So they don't end up getting kicked back to the House because we just ran out of time in committees to actually hear them.
Or sometimes the chairman doesn't like the bill and the chairman makes sure the bill dies. Unilaterally, chairmen have great amount of power. And as chairman of the Judiciary Committee, if a bill comes that I personally don't want to see advanced, if I want to, I can just keep that in my drawer and it doesn't come up for a vote of the committee. Now the sponsor of that bill, we have a bunch of rules that allow the sponsor to try and get a vote of the body to recall that bill out of my committee so it can be assigned to a different committee. So you see bills move around all the time where, you know, a bill that should be a judiciary bill, but Chairman Washington just sat on the thing. Now it's been recalled and it's going to ag, or it's going to minerals. And some other committee is now going to look at that bill. And sometimes that other committee is very friendly and they'll help pass that bill. Other times they look at it and go, this is so far out of our wheelhouse, we're not comfortable dealing with it, it still dies. But committee chairmen have quite a bit of power. But committee bills don't always go to the committee. You'll see, we had a police canine bill that went to ag. And sometimes it's just
Animals.
workload. 1 year judiciary, we just got buried. It's like all these bills that got introduced were judicial topics. They were law enforcement, courts, family law, all these types of things that normally come to judiciary, and there was just one bill after another, and we just got swamped. And so all of a sudden, all these police canine bills went to ag, and, you know, because some other committee had to step up, because we just didn't have enough time to deal with all of them.
And sometimes, yeah, it's interesting, because you'll end up with bills, it's like, why are we talking about this? Gaming, things related to gaming, for some reason, originated in travel, rec, and wildlife, and now we're going, why? I guess, that's, we're the ones to do it, but now there's so many, it's so big, it's too much for even a committee. That's where it originated, I guess.
I hate to go back on my word. I promise that's my last question. Because you said when you started, I had the question when you started the bill introduction and drafting part. What is that threshold like? How many people have to be affected by a situation before a legislator drafts something up for law to be
So,
debated on?
I don't think it's a matter of a number of people. It's just, that's how we come to understand there is a problem in the statute. So right now, this is a bill that is in front of the Judiciary Committee. There is a family in Glen Rock for a year and a half, 2 years. Really challenging situation. And it involved stalking between an adult and a minor. Well, our current state statute doesn't distinguish. So it's a misdemeanor across the board. Doesn't matter if you're a 20-year-old and a 6-year-old. I mean, we don't distinguish in statute between adults and minors. That's a problem. So because this challenge, as it went through the courts and we realized a deficiency within state statute, so now there will be legislation, in theory, it's working its way through judiciary right now.
We passed it out of committee.
Passed it out of committee, so that law, that legislation, that proposed legislation, then when we get into session in February, they will work to introduce it. 2/3 of us have to say, yes, this is important. So while that was one family, it may affect a lot of families, but it was that one example of here's a deficiency in state statute. So it's not a number of people it affects, it's just the person, the entity, the thing, bringing that to our attention and saying, we have a problem. We have a problem because there's either a deficiency in statute or there isn't anything in statute, or it's just a problem that is brought to us.
And most of the time, we get way more requests than we can possibly carry through the legislature. In any session, if you get 3 bills passed, 3 of your personal bills passed in the session, you've done remarkably well. Cause most of the time, you're lucky to get one through the session. So if you sponsor 9 different bills, you're not gonna get all 9 bills passed. And so most of us are pretty cautious about how many bills are we gonna bring forward. And so every year I'll have a lot of people ask me to sponsor a bill or take up a topic that I'll decline, not because I don't want to help, but it's a numbers thing. You just can't deal with all these issues every year.
And some of them, that's going back to we have to be mindful, right? Is this just a problem that maybe it's a municipal ordinance, maybe it's municipal planning and zoning, maybe it's a county issue, maybe it's, I actually had a constituent call me and say, here's a problem, but it was at a county level. So once I talked that through and said, this isn't statutorily something, this is a county level problem, so we need to talk to, the county clerk. So some of the problems that we experience locally aren't appropriate for a state level, because the state statute, really, these are the laws that affect everyone. So there may be some things that come to us, I'm tired of not having a stop sign on my street. I get that, I do. I'm tired of having potholes. I get that, I do. At the state level, I can't do anything about that, but it's a city thing, right? So some of them are just, depends on where it is most appropriate, and if there is a lack or deficiency in the state level that's creating that problem with the state statute.
If you did sponsor like 9 bills like that, and several of them didn't pass, could you save them for the next session then, or do they have to go away after they finish?
Start all over.
Start all over.
If a bill dies this year, it starts all over brand new next year if we want to carry it on. And sometimes it takes 2 or 3 times for a bill to get enough traction to pass. But yeah, the whole process starts all over, except the bill's already been drafted. So you save that amount of time if you bring a bill that you have this year and you bring it back next year.
But it has to come up through the committee again.
It has to go through the whole process again, yeah. So I'm really sad that, the Representative Harshman is not here, because he crushes. I don't know how many bills he introduces every year, but he's a rock star. Like, seriously? Steve is pretty
Doesn't
good.
pass them all.
He doesn't, but he drafts a lot of them, yeah, he does. He's the king of drafting legislation. So anyway, it goes to committee, right? That is when public comment happens during that time, but it's really there's one day, by the time we open it and have public comment and then work it and then amend it and maybe 2, but yeah, some of them, it moves pretty quick when it's in committee. It moves pretty quick. So then the committee is gonna decide whether we want this to move forward or not. If it doesn't, it dies. If we decide to pass it out of committee, then it goes back to, I'm just gonna stay on the House because that's where I'm at. So it will come out of committee to the House. Then when it comes back, it goes into committee of the whole, right? Okay. So committee of the whole is awesome. That's what COW is, it's committee of the whole. So I remember when I first got elected, I get a text from our former speaker, Albert Summers, and he said, you have to do COW. I don't know what that means. What is COW? But then I learned it's committee of the whole. So it is we as the House are a committee. So rather than one of the standing committees. So with our standing committees, there are 12, and the House has those 12 committees and the Senate has those 12 committees. So you may have a bill that originates in the House and goes to the House Travel, Rec, and Wildlife Committee, works through that process, comes into the House. Then if it passes out of the House, it goes to the Senate. Well, then it gets kicked out to the Senate's Travel, Rec, and Wildlife Committee. They're very different, right? But we both have those standing committees. During the interim, which is what we're in now, they're joint committees. So all of us are working together, which is why, for me, the bills, the drafts that come out of joint committees, I tend to put a lot of faith in, because you have both the House and the Senate working together on this legislation, and they've done the vetting process. There's been a lot of public comment. There's been a lot of, work with agencies. They really invest the time and energy. So when a draft comes out of joint anything, I'm like, oh yeah, that's pretty solid, right? Because I know both houses have worked on this.
So
When you do cow,
Yes.
what that means is the speaker gets to go in his office and have a cup of coffee.
And one of us.
Individual members, one of us will be the chair of committee of the whole for that day. And so it's really a great opportunity for freshman legislators to learn the rules of parliamentary procedure and run the show. And it's always great to get a picture of yourself in the speaker's chair and send it home to your families. And I got the big seat today.
So it is, cause each one of us, gets to run cow. I know what that means now. But there is, process and procedures you have to follow. And then, so the first time, there were things happening, I don't know how to handle this. And there were other people like, well, we don't know what happens. But then other people, when they have cow, it just runs like clockwork, and it's 2 hours and they're done. And I'm like, well, why did you get an easy day? Why did this person, it just depends on what happens. But it really is a great way to understand how the process works. So when the bill comes out of committee, out of the individual standing committee, it comes to the committee of the whole. That is all of us. And so we get to decide then, is this legislation that we want to move forward as a whole committee? So when the bill comes back to us and is introduced back to the House, the first thing we hear is this was how it was presented to committee. These were the amendments that they made. And so this is now what it looks like. And so we get to review all of that information, how the committee amended it, all of that. And then we get to decide as a whole committee whether we want to move this forward for discussion. So there are bills that die in committee of the whole because the whole of us say, no, we're not moving that forward. If it does move out of committee of the whole, then it is now in the chamber and will go into its second reading. So the second reading, we get a lot of, public input. People are sending emails, phone calls. There will be people in the lobbies that send us notes and pull us off the floor. In that second amendment, because that's when a lot of our working to amend, clarify language, the shall needs to be a may, things like that. That's when we work a lot of the amendments to work the bill. And then after the second reading, it moves out of my file folder, it moves out of the second into the third reading. So then the next day, and that's dictated by statute, there's 24 hours between the second and the third, but there can't be more than that. So if you have a second reading of a bill you can't have a second reading on a bill on Friday, because then you wouldn't hear until.
You can.
You can, 'cause it's
You have to
business.
waive the rule and take
Yeah.
a vote to the floor there's ways around most things, but it can become very cumbersome.
But, so you have the second reading, and then within, the next business day, you have the third reading. And then the third reading really is the last opportunity for us to, present additional amendments, arguments, what we've heard, from the public. And so the third is us voting as a body, whether we want that legislation to pass from us to the other chamber. So during the third reading, you will either get a majority vote to move on to the Senate side, or we will say no, and it will die. So if a bill does leave the House and a majority votes for that to move on, then that bill, the state it's in, it could have been amended in the committee, could have been amended on the floor multiple times. That then becomes the bill that we hand off to the Senate, and then it goes through the same process. So on the Senate side, the first reading, it's introduced. The president assigns it to a committee. The committee will, call for public comment. They will hear testimony. They will work the bill. They will amend it. They will do what they think makes it better. The committee will then kick it back to the Senate. The Senate will do the committee of the whole, I think. Yeah, they did the same process. they decide, you know, whether they want it to move forward, and then it goes through a second reading and a third reading and a, you know, public comment on that side. So really the opportunities for public comment are when it's in committee. Well, that's really the only time you can testify, because once it gets on the floor, you can talk to us and we can amend it, but you don't get to testify anymore. So public comment and testimony, your ability to truly say what you need to say is when it's in committee. Once it moves out of committee, you have to wait until it gets to committee on the other side. Yeah, committee's the time to do it. So some folks, when they're watching a bill, I mean, it is tough to keep track of where it is. So, you know, as soon as it goes into either house, it's gonna get assigned to committee first. So figuring out what committee it's been assigned to. Then once it moves out of committee and comes in, it's on our general file. General file are the ones that we hear during committee of the whole. And then it goes to the second reading and the third reading. And those move pretty quickly. So there are times that people will call and say, or send me an email, and we're in second or third reading,
Or the bill's already gone.
or it's already gone. I understand, and it has left the House. It is now on the Senate side, so you might want to reach out to them. But it's difficult to keep track of where it is. But I think the brilliance of it is, because you think about, these are laws that affect all of us. And so just to willy-nilly pass a law, right? That's why, government is so slow, because it goes through this process. So we have a lot of people looking at it, a lot of people delivering, and a lot of points of public comment. So hopefully by the end, if it passes through the House and through the Senate, it's pretty solid, and then it goes to our governor. So the governor can either sign it, it's law. He can veto it, says nope, kicks it back. If it does get vetoed, then we can overrule that. I think that's 2/3. Yeah, so we can
Both
overturn
houses.
it. Yeah, both houses take 2/3 to overturn it. And he can allow it, which means he doesn't veto it, he doesn't sign it. He just allows it to pass into law. So depending on what he wants to do. Those are the only 3 options that he has, though. Those are our standing committees. And this part, I'm gonna go really quickly because I promised a panel and one of our mayors is here. So I'm gonna move through this one pretty quickly. And I will stay after to answer any questions, but with our WYO ledge, this is the best way to figure out where information is and where bills are, what draft they're in. I mean, all of the information, it really is super stellar. So if you go to WYO ledge, this is the main screen. When you go into state statutes, you can plug in any statute, 36-2-9. And it will tell you, here's the statute and here's the wording. Constitution, the same thing. You can just plug it in and it'll pull that. State finances, most things, budget revenue, you'll find there, you can find there. Publications, research, citizen engagement, all of that information is there. With these bottom 4, with the calendars, legislative meetings, if you click on calendars and just click on the House, it will show the calendar. This is what our calendar looks like. These are the days and the times that we're meeting. Every committee is there. Our session schedule, that lets you know. Yeah, when we're in session, when we're out of session. Prior session calendars is all there. Committees. So when you go to committees and click on joint and standing, it'll bring up a list. I'll show you, well, there's the calendar. There's an example of the calendar. So I just clicked on September 2025 and it said, here's all of the things your legislature is doing in September. So air transportation, that's the committee I'm on. I was just in Jackson on the 3rd. School recalibration is meeting, cap finance, gaming just meeting today. Energy council will be here, blockchain, capital investments, no, what is that? Interpretive exhibits, I don't even know, oh, that's at the Capitol. That's what we're doing this month. So when you click on calendar, you can just pick a month and it'll tell you what your legislative branch is doing at that time.
Why don't you click on details real quick?
Well, I can't, I have to get out of this, hold please. I know how to do that because I'm awesome like this. Oh, no, Scott's awesome like this. Okay, so how do I mouse this baby? Oops, nope.
You could use arrow keys if you need.
Gray tab on the side.
Yeah.
How do I go back where I was? Oh, this is so, where do you want me to go?
There's a gray tab on the side, just click and hold on that gray tab and pull it down.
Yes, he says he. Okay,
And then click on your meetings,
our ledge meetings,
legislative meetings over here.
okay.
And scroll down again, and then click on details for one of like school recalibration.
Okay, so, details right here?
Yep.
And that'll show you, then I can go into any of those things. So I can see what their agenda for the day is. The meeting materials, so if they're considering any draft legislation, that's where it's gonna be. Gives you all the things, so there's working draft 2025 evidence-based model report. You
So
click
every
on
member of
link.
that committee is expected to read all of that material before you meet. The reading
Yes.
list is incredible.
It's horrible, it's horrible, yeah. Anytime, I mean, yeah, before committee, I mean, or even the night before, when we've got bills coming through, there's a lot of information that we have to work through and kind of digest. So that's just for one day, that's their meeting materials for one day. Decorum will tell you, yep, here are the rules that we need to follow. I didn't understand a lot of the process and decorum rules. Like, why can't I say Representative Washit? Why can't I say on the floor? And it really is, there's a lot of the decorum is in place to remove any personal attachments, so we are just discussing ideas. We are just discussing legislation, so we try to keep it, so it's not personal at all. It's not about the person, which is kinda cool. So with any of these, I'm gonna go back, how do I go back to the main thing now? If I go to, I'll figure out the pad, I will, I promise. So with when we're in session, which we're not right now, but when we're in session, you will see the calendar, the rules and procedures, laws, journal, all of those things. That's a constitutional thing, we have to keep a journal of all of our activity. But you can find the bill by number, by catch title, any of those things, you can plug it in the information. And when you look up a bill, it will bring up if you look on this side, it's a PDF version, this was the bill as it was introduced. This is the bill, if it has an appropriation or fiscal note, it'll say this is what the impact is to that agency. If it's been amended, it will tell you, it'll have all of those listed. And then the very last action that was taken, is it in committee? Has it moved to the floor? Is it on second reading? Is it on third reading? Did it die in committee? It'll tell you what the very last action was and where it is. There's nothing going on right now, but, so you can figure out just from the bill, where is it? You will see, for most of these, if it says, oops, I just messed
Well,
it
House
up.
Bill 1's the budget bill.
It's the budget bill, yeah, I shouldn't have clicked on that one. But you'll see down here, right, where it's, why did you do that? Stop doing that to me. Those are all the amendments that failed. Wow, we had fun with that one, didn't we? Right here, so where it says H, third reading, that means it's in the House, it's on its third reading. But in that, it didn't pass out of third reading, 43 to 14, and then it moved on. But you'll see, it's introduced, right? Kicks out to committee, then it comes back to committee of the whole. We talked about it as a committee, it passed out of committee of the whole, now it's in the second reading in the House, now it's in the third reading, then it goes to the Senate, it's been received. The Senate says, hey, we've received this, we're gonna introduce it and then kick it out to committee. So just by looking up because I've actually had people text me, my committee's in cow. Yes, that's committee of the whole, and that's what that means. So it's just understanding, what some of the jargon and where it is and how do I find it, and that'll tell you where it is and where it's gonna be. And we never really know. I mean, it might be on our list of general files that's coming up next, so we think we're gonna hear it tomorrow, but then it doesn't happen. And so it gets pushed so we don't actually hear it. These are any amendments that have happened. This is a budget bill, so it's gonna have a lot of them. But it'll tell you who who amended it? Was it during the second or the third reading, and who was the representative that worked, to amend it? That being our budget bill. And then you can see whether the amendment, whether we passed or failed it, whether we adopted it or not. It'll show up for every bill, every single one of them. Will give you a pretty good idea. Fiscal note, how we voted. You can click on any one of these and it'll tell you, these are the people that voted for it and against it. What's really cool with this website is when we're doing voice counts on the floor, it's live. So you can watch it and see how we vote.
That's one we voted opposite on.
That never happens.
You voted wrong.
I voted wrong. It's so funny because sometimes there will be an amendment or something and Art will stand up and I'm like, what are you doing? And then he'll look down at me, what are you doing? There's only a few of those. I mean, some of the bigger ones. And that's what's really cool. I mean, we don't agree on all things. And that's okay. That's okay.
So one of the things I just want to emphasize is, in the course of a session, you're gonna make hundreds and hundreds of votes on introductions, on amendments, on committees, you're gonna have hundreds of votes. You're gonna have hundreds of votes. And then come election time, you're gonna get a mailer saying, Representative Campbell voted this way on this bill, and Representative Washer voted that way on that bill. And hold up 3 or 4 votes to try and impugn or endorse the candidate, right? And that really doesn't carry the whole picture. It doesn't tell the whole story about the body of work that was accomplished over the course of the session. But oftentimes there'll be hot button issues, and sometimes bills will be introduced. This is the game of politics, right? There'll be bills introduced that no one expects to pass, but they just want to make somebody vote no on this bill, right? This is mom and apple pie. Who voted against mom and apple pie? Washington voted against mom and apple pie. What kind of communist would do that, right? And so, they'll have a bill with a great title, but it's got a bunch of stuff in it that they know the bill's probably not gonna pass, but it'll be utilized to differentiate between politicians who are on this side and politicians who are on that side.
And they'll look at your voting record, there are bills that I voted against, and they'll say, I've already heard it, all of the things. But don't ask me why I voted against it. It's not because I'm opposed to in principle, right? Maybe there was some other issue. There were some things towards the end when we were taking, supplemental budget things and maybe tucking them into bills that weren't appropriate and it wasn't gonna stand. So I love this and I love this. As soon as you put these together, I'm voting no. And here's why, right? So I think truly just asking the question, why did you vote no? Why did you vote against this? Why did you, helps explain some of that. This is just, I pulled up the bill that I ran just so you can see. When you pull up an individual bill, it'll tell you, this is where it originated in the House. That's what the HB means. It's a House bill. It originated in the House. The number 22. It's been enacted, so that's the Enrollment Act. House Representative, 68th Legislature. So this is now law, but it will tell you how it originated over here. This is the version that was introduced. Engrossed means, has it been amended? Has it been changed? What does that look like when it's adopted out of committee and out of the House? Version that has passed through both chambers. So what does that version look like? If there's a fiscal note, and then how it ended up. So it'll tell you where it went through, where it ended up, what amendments were done, fiscal notes, how we voted on each of those, and then how it ended up. So you can pull up
digest.
any piece of legislation, and it really breaks it down.
Here you see who voted for and against in committee, who voted for and against on second, third reading. On third reading with roll call vote. Here's the shall and may.
My bill was never voted
That's one I haven't clicked on yet, digest. I'll have to
It
do that.
is so good. I mean,
Yeah.
I would really go to the Wild Ledge site and just play around with it. There is so much information in there. It really is astounding. Every bill from every session, go back however many years. If it's a committee bill, I can search bills, session information. I can look up, as far as your senators and your representatives, plug in a district, it'll find you. Really cool tool on this though, as far as finding your people. Wait, I just blew it, I went too far. I think when I first discovered this website, I don't even know how long I spent just playing with it and all of it. But there's a place that has a map where you can say find, and you just put in your address and it'll tell you, these are your representatives and these are your senators.
Yeah.
It's really cool. That's not very fun, I don't know why it went there. And so the Ledge, we have a website that is all of our information, all of the work that we have done. Courts has the same thing, Wild Courts, and then the governor has, the same thing. So you can just go to each of those three and just play with them. Looking up every constitution. You can just put in keywords and say, I wanna find cities. And it'll say, here are all of the statutes in the Constitution that relate to cities. And then you have to wade through all of that information. But it really is amazing. Stuff that you can find on here. I will stay and answer more questions, but here's what I'm gonna, if you guys would like to stay, because we do have our mayor back from Mills and another state representative. So if you wanna stay and ask questions, that would be fantastic. If you want me to walk through any of this, website, I will be happy to do that. Really grateful we didn't do anything with budget and revenue. I didn't even have enough time for this stuff. So truly grateful. Yeah, that you guys are here. If you want to stick around, I'm not gonna go around. Scott and Maddie might get angry because they want to go home. But happy to answer any other questions or provide any other information, and pick up one of the resource guides because that lets you know who all of us are if you have questions. So, but if you have final questions for either our mayor or our representative, maybe take a couple minutes to see, because you drove all the way over here. Any questions from you guys while we have them?